So the topic of my presentation is quite different from the others so far, especially because the languages under investigation are two sign languages, especially so Italian sign language, LIS, and French sign language, LSF. And I will talk about comprehension of verb directionality and the effect of late first language exposure on language comprehension in adulthood. Okay, this is the roadmap of my presentation. I will start with a brief introduction about verb directionality in sign languages. So directional verbs are a specific class of verbs. They move in space from one argument to the other. We call to another argument. We call forward verbs those verbs in which the movement goes from the subject to the object. Like I will show you now an example, and in the example you will see a verb in Italian sign language, lis, which is give a present, and it moves from the subject to the object. So I, book, give you as a present, and the movement is from the subject to the object. Forward verbs are the most common type of directional verbs in sign languages, but we also have backward verbs in which the movement goes from the object to the subject. Here you have an example of the verb copy, again in Italian sign language. I, Pietro, copy. Pietro is like a third person. Okay, so in this case, the movement goes from the object to the subject. Not all verbs in sign languages are directional. So for example, in lis, I hope you can see me and not only the slide, but for example, the verb think is like this. And if I think about you, the movement is like this. And if you think about me, it is the same. Okay? Linguists do not agree on the theoretical description of this type of verbs, of directional verb. For some scholars, the verb movement is a form of agreement. So in this framework, directional verbs are called agreeing verbs, and directionality is considered a full linguistic phenomenon. On the contrary, for other scholars, they insist on the gestural nature of this kind of verbs, and they call them like indicating verbs. Okay, now I will focus on the issue of age of exposure, which is very relevant when considering the population of deaf signers. Okay, so let's consider deaf children. Only a minority of them, less than 10%, is born in deaf families and are exposed to a natural language, a sign language from birth. On the contrary, the vast majority of deaf children is born in speaking family, and only a minority of them at some point in life will be exposed to a sign language. This makes the population of deaf signers a very special population. If we consider adult deaf signers, only a minority of them are native signers. The vast majority of them are non-native signers who have been exposed to a sign language at some point at different ages. We know from previous literature that the comprehension of verb directionality is affected by the age of first exposure to language, and this was studied in American sign language and in British sign language. So far, no study focuses on Italian sign language, LIS, and French sign language, LSF. However, we think that it's important to focus on various sign languages because in general, the vast majority of studies about age of exposure effects came from ASL and BSL, And we know that both the US and UK are very advanced countries in the recognition of sign languages. This is not the same worldwide. For example, in Italy, Italian Sign Language list is not recognized as a minority language by the law. So the social linguistic situation is very different. Okay, now I will introduce you our experiment. We had two main goals. The first one was to evaluate whether age of exposure has an impact on verb directionality comprehension in LIS and LSF signers. And the second goal was to verify if there is any difference in comprehension between forwards and backward verbs. To do so, we collected data with LIS signers and LSF signers divided in 3 different groups. We considered native signers, those signers who were exposed to a sign language from birth and with at least one signing parent. Then we had early signers with an age of first exposure to language during kindergarten, before age 6. And we also considered late signers with first exposure between 6 and 15 years of age. We collected data from 38 LIS signers and 40 LSF signers. Within each language, the groups were balanced in level of education and in general cognitive abilities. LSF signers compared to LIS signers had a higher level of education, and they also were younger. We developed a truth value judgment task in which participants had to decide if a series of sentences were true or false. So how? The task, each item started with a non-linguistic video like this. Okay, so there's no sign language here. And let me see if I can, okay. She is Valerie, and she is Valentina. And in the video, Valerie is teaching math to Valentina, okay? And this not linguistic video could be followed by 2 different sentences. And here you have an example from LSF, from French Sign Language. And in one case, as you can see here, the sentence, I mean, okay, you don't know the meaning, but this sentence is, I am teaching math to you. So the sentence is a correct match with the video. Okay, so in this case, the sentence was correct. Otherwise, the sentence could be wrong, but not ungrammatically, but with wrong agreement. So the semantic role were not correct. And this means I'm teaching math to a third person, not to you, Valentina. Okay. And participants had to decide if the sentence matched or not with the not linguistic video. We have 2 main hypotheses. We expected accuracy to decrease from native to late signers, and we had the expectation of backward verbs to be more difficult than forward verbs, especially for non-native populations. Okay, so I show you the results, if I can use this. Okay, you have here LIS and here LSF, native, early, and late signers in pinkish forward verbs and in bluish, let's say, backward verbs. match condition and mismatch condition. We analyzed separately the match and the mismatch condition, and in LIS we obtain no differences across group in the match condition, but a group effect in the mismatch condition. In the mismatch condition, native were more accurate than early and late, with no difference between early and late signers. So the difference was between native and non-native signers. In LIS, we found no difference between forward and backward verbs. In LSF, the situation was somehow similar, with native signers performing better than early and late signers, and with no significant difference between early and late signers. But this was true both in the match and in the mismatch condition. So also in this case, there was a clear difference between native and non-native signers overall. Then in the match condition, there was a marginal impact of directionality with higher accuracy for forward verbs, but the difference was not significant. Okay. To sum up, we found that the capacity of interpreting directionality in LIS and LSF is affected when access to language is delayed, and this is coherent with previous results in other sign languages. And to us, but we need to investigate more this issue, but as nothing similar to sensitive periods has been established for gestural system, these results are consistent with those approaches that take directionality to be a full linguistic phenomenon. We did not found any statistical significant difference between backward and forward verb. There was this trend in LSF, but so we did not have so many participants. So maybe we need like further study to investigate if there is a cross-linguistic difference or not. And I hope, as a take-home message, I wanna like highlight the fact that delayed first language exposure has long-lasting effects in adulthood, and this finding, which is replicated across languages and linguistic structures, give clear information for help policymakers dealing with prelingual hearing loss. Okay, I thank you for your attention. I'm here to answer your question, and I have some contacts, and also this research was supported by a Horizon 2020 grant, and we have a website with different assessment tool in various European cell language. So if you are interested. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. First question is from William.
Yes, really interesting, very interesting work. I had two, actually, I guess a comment and a question. The comment was just to mention some work that might be of interest. It is on American Sign Language, but looking at a slightly different population, namely children who had delayed first language exposure to American Sign Language. So these were, so this is a dissertation by Stephanie Burke, B-E-R-K, at the University of Connecticut, looking at children who were misdiagnosed as mentally retarded and then identified as deaf at the age of about 5 to 6 years old. What Stephanie found there was that she followed these children over a period of about 3 years as they started to acquire ASL, and they had persistent problems with the agreement system. Very specifically, the agreement system was problematic, it seemed, throughout, even long term. And so that, I think, was her interpretation, was that that's an especially vulnerable area of grammar for children with language delay. So I just wanted to mention that as possibly
Yes, thank you. I did not know this word, but I will look at it. Thank you.
Okay. And the other comment was just about sort of subject-object order. You talk about forward and backward directionality, but I wonder if the right notion might be something more like source and goal. It seems like source first, goal second would cover both the giving and the copying. And I wonder if that's how people are interpreting or the argument structure of these verbs. So just a thought. I don't know if it makes any sense in general.
Okay, nice question. I really don't have an answer, but because the literature that I know look at argument and consider like the movement if it goes from the subject to the object or vice versa. But
this would be a little bit more like theta roles rather than grammatical function,
no,
maybe.
It's a good comment. Yeah, I need to think about this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.